Welcome back to the Let Us In podcast. When there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth. And as hordes of zombie films have grown over the years, this subgenre of horror has become one of the most prolific. I'm Justine, aka JustineUFF.
I'm Emma, aka Emma of the Empire.
And I'm Crystal from Creepin' It's Spooky.
Emma, what was the first zombie film?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked me because I'm prepared. The first zombie film was White Zombie, which is interesting in itself. It was based off of a book, Magic Island, which came from a guy that went to Haiti and saw all the slaves working on coffee and sugar plantations, and it came from them. And then over White Zombie, White Zombie. Starring Bela Lugosi, and it's more of an allegory for slavery. It's more connected to our appropriated idea of the voodoo, where there's a sorcerer that kind of puts you under his spell, whether you're dead or alive, but has a certain power over you. And then
What is this?
what?
That's what Bela Lugosi does in the movie. He does this hand thing. That's how he entrances you.
How do you do that? You have to be Hungarian.
Sorry, I didn't know what she was doing. I haven't seen that movie.
The ghosty thing. He does the and then he does the
or like just the eyes.
Bela Lugosi. And then when we come to like a little bit further down the line, of course, there's some movies that make a little bit of allegory with World War II, Hitler and his followers and zombies, but zombies really didn't keep alive as much in the horror genre when they weren't so much a parody. Like we think of zombies on Broadway, right? But I Walked with a Zombie is actually a very serious horror zombie film that kind of kept zombies in the running for being a very serious horror creature, monster, the undead. Of course, we all know from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, those independent filmmakers, Peace, Love, and Granola.
You New Englanders.
What did I say? What did I say?
Pittsburgh.
I wasn't even trying. Peace, Love, and Granola didn't work. We thought it was going to work with the Vietnam War going on, and then it didn't. And it was very depressing with all the atrocities that people were seeing on their TV. A lot of young men being drafted. So that guy from Pittsburgh, Romero, is thinking, what's something the human race could not ignore? Dead. Rising from the grave, which I think we could ignore it. That's us. But, rising from the grave. So Night of the Living Dead originally was him being inspired the book I Am Legend.
Coming to get you, Barbara.
They're coming to get you, Barbara. But they that were coming to get you in the Matheson book is vampires, not zombies.
Ooh.
And the movie originally was going to be about aliens, and then the original title of it was Night of the Flesh Eaters, and they never mentioned zombies in Night of the Living Dead, as most of our listeners already know. But
I'm still learning new stuff every time. Every time from you,
every
Emma.
time. And but when it came to censorship, that's when it became Night of the Living Dead. But Night of the Living Dead happened in an interesting time after.
Wait. Flesh Eaters was censored
Night
to
of the Flesh
Living Dead.
Eaters was the original
Can't have
title.
flesh. Never. Flesh.
Sexual or grotesque. But Night of the Living Dead came in at an interesting time. It was after the Hays Code, but before the MPA came up with their rating system. So Night of the Living Dead was fairly unchecked. So a lot of little kids go to like a matinee and see Night of the Living Dead and be terrified. Another thing about The Living Dead that was important is that through some mistakes, it became public domain. So it became one of the most seen movies. It is one of the most horror-hosted movies of all time. But after The Night of the Living Dead, zombie movies kind of went in split direction when it came to the rights from John Russo and George Romero. George Romero went to go make his sequels, Dawn of the Dead, probably a favorite, Day of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and Survival of the Living. Then
a lot of
Russo went in the other direction, which his very satirical, a bit more funny, Return of the Living Dead, which is one of my favorite. That is the one where we came with the thing where zombies eat specifically brain.
That one's so funny.
Brains.
I love
And
that
I
one.
love about
is funny.
Return of the Living Dead is that it's not, you don't just get them in the head. You even if you cut them into little pieces, all those little pieces are still moving.
Yeah.
It's hard to destroy a living dead person. It's difficult. And I love how they also mention Night of the Living Dead. The movie itself is something that exists within that world. So that has 5 sequels. Then one more separation. Just one more little digression is the Italian zombie movie. Lucio Fulci is like the king of that. He's our godfather of gore after Herschel Gordon Lewis. We got Zombie, aka Zombie 2. We've got City of the Living Dead and The Beyond. But I don't feel like we got a big boost, a big change in zombies until 28 days later, which then comes the argument.
I'm so glad that you brought that up.
I know, because then comes the argument that starts, which we will always continue to have from now on. Is it
What's
a zombie movie? Is it a zombie movie?
Is it a zombie movie? Well, let's talk about that because what spurred this entire episode was the dropping of a quite interesting new film called The Sadness, which has just hit streaming services here in America and Canada, right?
Yep.
So we watched that film and decided we were going to do a zombie episode. I think it's interesting that people don't consider 28 Days Later a zombie movie, but then at the same breath called this like the best new zombie movie and compared it to 28 Days Later.
Yeah.
I think it's less of a zombie movie, in my opinion,
do
than
too.
28 Days Later. What do we consider a zombie movie, and what are some boxes for you guys that need to be checked for it to be a zombie movie?
You know, for me, it's these people they've been changed and they
Mm.
can't go back. So whether it be they've died and now they're the undead, or they've been reanimated, or they're infected, their human life is no longer there. And they also spread the virus via bodily fluids, bites, they attack people, they eat people. I think all of those constitute, for me anyways, as a zombie.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that my definition is very broad, and perhaps even I should include the sadness. I felt like the sadness was much more similar to the crazies, which to me felt more of people still just completely losing any inhibitions and being horrible, and that being what makes them quote unquote zombies. And yeah, to some degree I can see that, because for me a zombie is someone who lost their humanity and all control over themselves against their own species. Something very, bare bones, instinctual. That's it. They're not here. There's no reasoning. Yeah, there's no reasoning with them. They are driven by either instinct or disease of some sort. Something is driving them, and it is not humanity. It is far removed from it. It is now instinctual, primal drive, and that's it. There's no reasoning. There's some films where that is changed, and then you kind of become more accepting of them. Films like Day of the Dead, where they have Bub, right?
Oh, Bob, I love him.
Like,
love
you
Bub.
feel for him once you see that he's thinking things through, and he's sad. He kind of gets really sad. So you feel some empathy for him, whereas in other zombie films you feel like almost no empathy once they've become this new being, this zombie. And then there's one body.
Land of the Dead, whether you see a zombie play a trumpet, do you feel bad for that zombie?
I do feel bad for them because it feels like just an echo of their humanity. That's it.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's still just instinctual. It's not like they're playing the trumpet because they should be playing the trumpet right then and there. It's almost like an echo of their humanity is just kind of flickering at the end, but they're not really there anymore. It's almost like that was the last thing they happened to be doing.
The Romero touch, starting with Dawn of the Dead, that they were going to the mall as like part of routine, instinctual.
Habit.
Or the fact that in Day of the Dead, the doctor realized that Bub wasn't eating. They aren't eating because they need nourishment. It's just instinctual. I think a lot of people draw the line, which is fair enough. Like if they're not undead, they're not zombies. I know a lot of people make that line, and I understand that. It's not my line, but I think the difference
Yeah.
between 28 Days Later and a movie like The Sadness is in The Sadness, they're very different than themselves, but there's still a little bit of that person. Even if it's like the worst of humanity, it's like the worst of that person's humanity connected with the worst of what humans can do, the worst
Yeah, they're
things
like
people
still
can think of.
manipulating and planning.
It's still
Yeah.
too connected into humanity as opposed to 28 Days Later. There's
Mhm.
not much difference from a person infected from 28 Days Later and a person from Return of the Living Dead or Land of the Dead. Even though Land of the Dead, the zombies are slower.
Or
Return of the
Cujo.
Living Dead is the first running zombies. They're running at normal human speed, but running
Yeah.
zombies, but they're still zombies. And they talk still. People, they are undead. We know that in Return of the
Yeah.
Living Dead. That's where people's line usually is. But there's a lot of other things that happen that people usually consider zombie no-nos. They talk
Yeah.
a little bit. Send
Mhm.
more paramedics. Or we
Mhm.
eat the brain because I feel my body rot the pain. I mean, it's talking. There's a certain amount of humanity
Yeah.
to it, even though they're undead. So I think
Right.
that it really comes down to how human they seem or how much they just seem like a husk.
Yeah.
Like just like this instinctual non-personality drive.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
in
and I think that's
Sadness they talk too much.
they do. They
They
do.
talk
They
like
like
They talk too much
he
to be
chooses
zombies.
that girl
Yeah.
and he like goes after her the whole time. He even
Yeah.
locks out his other like zombie people from getting to her because he wants
Yeah.
her all to himself. Like that
Yeah.
is not something that zombies do. They're like
No.
their drive as zombies is like to just spread. That's it. 28 days later, I think that that's also still shown. Like their goal is just to they're driven by rage, sure,
Yeah.
but it's almost like they still have to touch everybody because they'll attack somebody, they'll bite them and move on. Now, if
Yeah.
they were like just attacking people just to kill them and there was no other targets in the room, or they weren't distracted by going after somebody else, they wouldn't just sit there until that person was dead. They moved on. They looked for a
Yeah.
new target every single time, even if they weren't
Yeah.
dead. So to me, it felt like there was some sort of instinctual that disease was trying to live and spread.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think there's any hard, fast rules. And I think that the subgenre is evolving just as much as any other film does where things change. You know, not all vampires are killed the same way or made the same way. Not all
Exactly. Yeah.
zombies are the same. So
Yeah.
it's going to change. Let people count what they want as zombie films. That's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Like,
One way or
don't
the
like
other. If they need to be from the grave, fine. If they talk and can have a full conversation and that's a zombie for you, fine. But you know, we
Yeah.
all have our
Yeah.
own.
Well, let's
Well,
talk about 28 Days Later real quick because in that film specifically, and I think this is the one that has the most contention, they
Mhm.
never actually say that someone with the rage virus doesn't die and reanimate immediately. Like there's no alluding to that. There's no saying it out loud. But as an audience, we also don't know. We don't have the full picture of the rage virus. We know what we get in the opening act with the monkeys and the students trying to
Well,
like
it's based on
release
the
them.
Ebola virus, but I know that because I'm a super nerd. I read the comic.
I think generally it is based on the Ebola virus, but I think more for the film itself, again, you just don't know. You don't know anything. It's not meant for you to know. You're discovering everything almost along with the character. To say that they don't die and come back, not necessarily true. We don't know that.
Yeah.
We just don't.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, the director the director of 28 Days Later does not consider it a zombie movie, whereas the writer, Alex Garland, does. So
Hmm.
it's a very split movie even amongst the crew. So really, how
That's
do
really
the viewers
interesting.
know? Yeah.
Well, part of what zombie movies are about, no matter what, it's usually about humanity in general. And a lot of the time, a big part of that story is the idea of this changed, whether it's post apocalyptic or just a changed new normal, which we can understand more than ever right now, after, well, not after, but during
COVID. Yeah.
COVID. So it's one of
Yeah.
those ideas that, like, even in Night of the Living Dead, the idea that some of them are trying to come up, like Ben, our main character, he still thinks more of like getting back to normal as opposed to the
Yeah.
new normal. But a lot of people kind of criticize Barbara because she's in shock. It's kind of feel like her
Yeah.
character kind of knows this is it. Whether it's the end or not, she doesn't know. But this is it. Nothing's going back. This is what it
Yeah.
is now, and it's
Yeah.
going to be a new normal. After watching a lot of zombies films this week, if this did happen and we were able to contain it, there would be a new way of disposing of dead bodies or being around dead bodies.
Mhm.
There'd be a new protocol, and there would be a certain change that would feel not as severe as it actually is, because change doesn't happen in these big. Depends on your own
Yeah.
personal experience as well. So I think a big part of zombie movies is the idea of what happens when society changes or society is totally broken down. There's no government,
Mhm.
there's no authority
Yeah.
to help you or to tell you what to do. And what
I think
person are
we get
you
a
then?
good look into that with 28 Weeks Later when we see kind of what has happened and transpired, because at some point they die off and then they don't see them for a long enough time, so they start rebuilding society. And of course, as we know,
Too
it's not a
soon.
movie. It's not a
Too
movie if it doesn't get reintroduced, right? So they
Yeah.
start, it gets reintroduced, and you see what happens. They immediately just kill everybody off, like, well, wipe that slate. We did that wrong,
I
and
really
start over
felt
again.
28 weeks later because it was too soon for them to try and go. It's only 28 weeks trying to go back to England
Yeah.
like everything's fine, sure. And it just took
I
one family to mess up everything.
Yeah, that movie hits you in the feels because there's a lot of death. It's just an onslaught of death throughout that movie. The way that it opens up is so intense.
That is my
And
favorite opening scene. I love
yeah.
it.
What do you love about it? Like
Everything.
It's
I
brutal.
prefer 28 Weeks Later to 28 Days Later, just by a little bit. I love the whole
Yeah.
franchise, but the 28 Weeks Later, I don't know what it is about it. It sits with me more. But the opening scene is, to me, it's outstanding. The score is used to perfection, like the composer of that song.
I'm glad they kept it.
Oh my god. And they used it a
Yeah.
lot more in 28 Weeks Later. It's used a lot
They
more throughout
did.
the
It
movie.
seemed like any moment that there was a transition of events, they were using that
Yeah.
score of them between them like processing what had just happened and moving on to the next kind of act.
Yeah.
I do really like 28 Weeks Later. I am the opposite. I prefer 28 Days Later. I feel like it felt more
Really? I
grounded
wouldn't have
and like
thought that. Just saying.
well, I know you're right. Yeah, you would think I would prefer 28 Weeks Later because it's a little bit more pow pow and like commercialized, and I'm really drawn to those. There's something about the way that they filmed 28 Days Later I really like. I really like the way it looks like it's almost found footage, but not.
Yeah.
It feels really raw.
Yeah.
And I really love the character arc of our main protagonist and the way that he's developed throughout the whole film and where he ends up and how he's very much like our last bit of humanity is what it feels like, because he wasn't there for the worst of it yet. So we're experiencing it with him as the people around him are like a little bit more sad and like and angry, whereas he's still more hopeful and like doesn't want to hurt people, wants to find more people. And she's like, we got to survive no matter what, and like trying to like enlighten him into the worst of humanity, like what is actually out there. He kind of gets a taste for it, and you can see him really become different. And I love that last
so
scene
good.
where he rages out on them and saves them. It's so intense and beautiful. Like every moment of that ending act is just perfection. It felt like such a good wrap up. 28 Weeks Later felt more like an action movie. Technically felt more like most films play out, which is fine. I love it still. Like I still think I gave it like 4.5 stars. So I really do love it. I loved Hawkeye, Jeremy Renner.
Jeremy Renner.
I love Jeremy Renner. He's like the one good guy in the military, it seems like, besides the doctor and the helicopter pilot, who even he had hesitations on being a good guy. And then the way he dies is so, it's so sad.
It is.
What seemed to be the important thing to me about 28 Weeks Later was the importance of, that the scientists mentioned, that the children's lives are more important. In the context of the story, it's because their mother was immune to the disease to a point, and so they might be, and so that they are the key to a cure. But to me, it's like the idea of like the younger generation is more important to protect from these like things that, especially that we more so.
Well, she was kind of against bringing him in at all in the beginning.
Yeah.
She didn't want to bring in kids to this place.
She was apprehensive.
She didn't think they knew enough. And just like you alluded to, Emma, like it was too soon to be introducing children and
or anybody. It was too soon at all, which is like totally what the government's gonna do. if there's a zombie outbreak. We know
Always.
it. We know
Always.
it. It's
Yeah.
gonna be too soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
For a lot longer. Oh my god. Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
I'd rather be fucking live. Jesus.
Yeah.
You know,
I
and
agree.
you were talking about Cillian Murphy in 28 Days Later and his performance and stuff, and I absolutely give credit to him because he's spectacular in everything he does. But I have to
I'm
give credit
jealous
to
of his
Robert Carlyle.
eyelashes.
I know, right?
Robert
I
Carlyle.
wish I had eyelashes
Robert
like that.
Carlyle.
He
Yeah,
did.
Robert
He-
Carlyle like killed it in 28 Weeks Later. Like he was so scary. There's one scene in particular that always sticks with me, and it's when he reunites with his wife after he ditches her and then kisses
And
her.
she forgives him.
I know. And then they kiss and he gets the rage virus and then he goes batshit crazy in that
I would
room
need
where
a
she's
virus
literally
to be full
stuck.
rage after that.
Well, I know,
I
right?
didn't actually feel that bad for him, to be honest. I think he did what was
Oh, no.
logical. Like,
You know, it what
was he supposed to do? There was
Yes and no.
six rage virus people like broke into the house and they were separated by an entire room. And
right.
what was
Yeah.
he
You
supposed
want
to
to
do?
leave
He
a
was
little
trying to
boy
get them
behind.
out.
I'm sorry.
If I had other kids, and they did, if I had kids somewhere, I would
Well,
give a fuck
the other
about some
kids aren't
strange
present,
boy,
to be fair.
and my husband would be gone. I'd be like, bye, deuces, I got children.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, but you're a
He-
woman. You're a mother. It's a little different with a mom. Not that
Yeah,
dads
it
are
is a bit
important.
different.
I think his decision was fair considering. I just don't disagree with it. I understand the guilt he felt, and I think he should feel survivor's guilt. And the fact that he lied about it was
Yeah.
not okay. That didn't
Yeah.
sit right with me. He should have told the truth. And I think the truth is good enough. Like, they broke in, we got separated. I literally looked back and made a decision and had to get out of there to come to you kids.
Yeah, that is fair. I'll give
But he
you that. That
lied.
is fair.
And that was not okay because she turned
And
out
then
to
he
be
got
alive.
his-
And then
He got a little bit of when he got changed into the rage virus, like I guess the justice was served. But that scene where he's in the room with her and he like violently pushes her eyeballs in,
oh, it's
that scene has
gruesome.
stuck with me for ever since I watched it for the very first time. I don't know.
And
what
her
it is about that
panic.
scene. Yeah, you can
It's
see it in
because
both
she's
of their
completely
faces.
Because
immobilized.
she's strapped down.
Yeah,
And
she's
I hate
strapped
that.
down.
That is such a fear of mine, to be completely
Right?
immobilized and like
Yeah.
no control and to be stuck in a situation like that. There's a scene in The Crazies where they're all strapped down and the guy comes in with a pitchfork and like I think
Yeah.
it's in the remake. I don't know if it's in the original. I don't remember. He comes in with a pitchfork and he's just like and they like can't do anything and they're trying not to react because they don't want him to like focus in on them.
Yeah.
That scene is so scary to me. Like,
Yeah.
it makes me so uncomfortable.
Have you ever taken a
Yeah.
muscle relaxant?
I had an epidural when I was pregnant when I had my
Oh yeah,
daughter.
it's fucking terrifying, dude.
I
right?
hated it. I hated it so much. It was nice that I didn't
Can't
feel anything
move.
anymore because I was in a lot of pain, but like and that was nice. But the minute that I realized that I could not feel anything from the waist down, like it's almost like half my body just no longer existed. And I could like
Yeah.
touch my legs and knew that they were there, but knew I couldn't do anything if I needed to like run off or something. That freaked me out more than anything. I did not like that sensation, like lack of control. And who knows what could happen during that time? A zombie apocalypse. I'd have been fucked. Like,
Yeah, any of those scenes in any of those movies where you're stuck, like in Train to Busan or The Sadness, like when they're stuck on the train and they're just
Yeah.
facing this terrifying moment, that is so scary.
That's
Like,
actually
Oddly
my
enough,
favorite
Sadness,
scene in The
another movie
Sadness.
where it touched upon weight in an unnecessary way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did with the girl
Zombie
in the
Man.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a cultural thing? Because I feel like in
in
America,
the wheelchair. Oh, that
Maybe.
was so effed up. I cannot. That made my stomach hurt. I did not like that scene at all.
which part?
In The Sadness with the girl in the wheelchair with the
Oh, the eye
guy,
thing.
and he like runs up
No
his
fucking.
pants. Yeah, nope, don't like
Yeah,
that.
that's
Made me
the
really
scene in
uncomfortable.
that movie, and it's not like we don't see it, but it's like, but I feel that
Oh,
character. I
enough.
feel bad for that character completely. It's just like the whole
Yeah.
thing is that she's fat and ugly, right? So she's not her life isn't worth as much, and like
Yeah.
she's only kind of made a character make our main female character who's conventionally attractive seem more nice. I don't know. I just didn't. I know
Mhm.
that sounds like, oh, we're getting too sensitive, but I didn't like it. It made me uncomfortable.
Nope, I didn't like that
I'm
either.
not
It
an
didn't.
overweight person, but it makes me feel icky. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I didn't
I
like
didn't
it.
like it either, but I did like the train scene. That was my favorite
Me
part
too.
That
because
was
the
cool.
amount of blood and gore that happened in that scene did feel comical, and it was
Yeah.
fun. Like it was kind of fun,
The
and I
squirt
really
of
liked
blood
it.
that hit the ceiling of the train.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
it was
say,
just like
it's like a fountain.
I love that.
And then he's
freaking love
stepping
it.
in it. It looks like ketchup.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This
it was
movie
very
wasn't what I
Evil Dead
expected
vibe.
at all. People were talking about it like it was like August Underground or a Serbian film.
Yeah.
So I was
Oh, I
prepared
agree.
for like really close up and personal torture.
Me too.
But no, it was
It was
very
not
calm. It
nearly
was
as
more
bad
like
as I thought
the
it was
Evil
going to
Dead.
be.
No. People were
Literally,
telling me
the
that
worst
they
was the skull fucking. That was like the worst part.
Yeah,
of
and you
it.
don't
The
even
rest of
see it. It's just
You
implied.
do see
like
some SA, but it's
I
not
think
you
nearly
do.
as
other rape,
bad
I
as
think
it's been in
the
other
other
films.
raping scenes were worse because, like, you know, we kind of saw it more, even though they
Yeah.
were brief. When
They
it's like
were,
these
but they
women
were
being hung
even
by
like
dogs, but they're men, you know.
they
It's
were
just like,
typically like even not even conscious, which doesn't make it better. That's not what I'm saying. But I have seen way worse in other
oh no,
films. Like
I've seen way
Last
worse
House on the
too.
Left was one of the
Yeah.
worst SA scenes, especially
Yeah.
in the remake. It is so
No. The
brutal.
original is the worst. It's much longer, much more drawn out, and much more
Oh,
realistic. I think the
I
original is
remember the
worse.
remake more because I feel like it was really long.
I just
really,
feel
It
like the
really
was
sadness.
much longer than the original. It's very drawn out. It's very long.
Well, then
I
both
mean,
of
the original
them,
spin-off.
both of them are way worse.
Feel like the sadness didn't benefit from that aspect at all. I feel like that
Mhm.
was pointless for the movie. It was pointless for the story. I
The
really
baby
didn't
did. The
think-
babies were kind of felt like it added to it. Is that just me?
It
Am I
did.
just
the
I
sick?
babies in the trash.
No,
can.
I didn't like that at all either.
I
But
didn't
I
think it was
also
cool. I just thought it added
no,
to
it was
the
brutal.
story.
It did add to the story. You're right. I take issue with that politically though. I don't like that they made
Made
the
a scientist the bad guy too. I didn't like that.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Right during our pandemic times, like
It's not.
I get the point is supposed to be that everyone is capable of awful things. We're all this awful thing inside. I get it was supposed to be this nihilistic dark thing.
Yeah.
But having a story that included prominently a scientist character being a villain as much as the politicians, like with the politicians, when a grenade went off in his head, I thought it was hilarious. When it comes to
Yeah.
a scientist, I feel like we kind of need to build more faith in scientists than anything else right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that a movie should have that responsibility. It felt uncomfortable to me.
I did like the ending though. I liked the ending where she gets to the roof finally and you could tell that she got shot. Like they shot her immediately.
So I have an important question. So when it comes to the sadness, her boyfriend, right?
Mhm.
Do you feel that he got infected? Because the scientist said it's already in us. Like we didn't catch it. Like it's in us already.
Yeah.
Do you feel that he got infected during their phone conversation when she said, "I need you," and it was that her need of him and his feeling of burden that she.
No, I think he got infected during his like getting there to her, and that became the thing that he was latched onto as his
Well, you can
drive.
see him
I think
doing stuff though on the phone with her. Like you can see him visualizing that head in the water changing.
That was the
and, like, he
coolest
does this
part.
weird- yeah, like he starts seeing stuff while on the phone with her, but I don't know when he actually like gets infected. I don't know.
yeah, I just think somewhere along the line he got infected, and it could have
Yeah.
been anywhere because they don't actually tell you how it happens. Like it could be in the air, it could have been someone
Yeah.
coughing near him.
Which
But
I
I
was so
think
confused
she,
about with the train scene with that. Like the one guy
yeah.
was the only one infected on the train, and then all of a sudden a bunch of people were infected, and I was like, how are
And then
these
the
people
girl in the
getting
wheelchair
infected?
didn't get infected until she got
Yeah.
skull fucked. So
Yeah.
like it was very sorry.
I think it was. I think it was. I think it's triggered by something in your head. And I think the guy,
I think the scientist was
zombie
projecting.
guy. Oh, there's not really a zombie. I think the guy that follows her, that is hunting her, started to get infected when he's like, "I was nice to you. I was a nice guy. I was just complimenting you. What's wrong with being nice to a girl
Yeah.
on a train? What did I do?"
Fucking hated that
And
guy.
it feels like that
Me too.
started it, and then being around another a fully infected person fully brought it on. I don't know. That's just me. I
Yeah.
felt like it was something mental that just snapped.
I
that
think the
was-
scientist was just excusing his own behavior and was projecting and was trying to imply that it wasn't his fault. Like it was this
Good point. Good
disease.
point. Because we don't. Because otherwise we don't. I think the scene when we see the head
Yeah.
in the river, I thought that was the coolest
Yeah.
scene. I would have loved to see more of that.
Yeah,
Actually.
I like that too. I don't know. There was so many moments to that movie that I didn't find it as gory as people were saying. I didn't find it as good as people were saying. And I felt like
No.
they
It's
ripped
okay.
off a lot of movies. Like
Yeah.
there was like a scene on on the train with the same eyeball scene as in 28 Weeks Later. They
Mhm.
had a fire extinguisher headbanging scene, same as Irreversible by Gaspar Noé. They had there was just so many scenes that were reminiscent of other movies, and I was like, I feel like this is a ripoff of a bunch of different things. I personally was not a huge fan of it. There was moments that were really cool, and then it kind of dropped the ball everywhere else.
I literally only gave it 2 stars for the way that they
Yeah.
did the gore, which I thought was really fun. But
I
other
gave
than
it
that, it
3
was
for the
not
way
a
they
fun
did the
movie.
gore. I think that's partially because I try to compensate because I went in thinking something completely different about a movie. I'll probably try to be a little bit fair, but because I think that it's been a long time since we've gotten a really good, fun, gory movie. It's not meant to be something really. It reminded me a lot of Evil Dead 2, and then to Ash versus the Evil Dead. That kind of comedy with that amount of gore. That's what it reminded me
Well,
of.
that's exactly what Braindead reminded me of.
I love Braindead, Deadalive. That's one of the first movies that I actually, in junior high, someone's like, "Oh, have you seen it?" I'm like, "No, I haven't." And then I did. It kind of got me into a little bit more transgressive, but still super goofy movies. Dead Alive, aka Braindead, is one of the early, along with Bad Taste. Peter Jackson's early. It is extremely gory, but extremely goofy, ridiculous zombie movie. There's a whole scene with a zombie baby takes to the park for no reason, and it's just this whole slapstick
He's
comedy.
like just trying to take care of these guys. Like, I never,
like he doesn't. I guess he
just keeps
doesn't
them,
realize he doesn't know are they really fully dead. He's not sure. He doesn't want to burden anybody. Mama's
He's
boy.
so sweet.
He's so sweet, and their romance is so cute.
It is.
And it's so ridiculous,
He's
and all the
such a dummy,
characters are
though.
ridiculous. It's so fun, and the low budget that they had for all those really gross practical effects. And I know you guys love that. I love that custard scene and how gross it is. Like, it's before any
This is the
zombie.
creamiest custard I've ever had. I don't know why I sounded southern, but like
easily one of the grossest scenes of any movie, and it's literally just a guy eating custard, but it
it's so
custard
gross.
with pus in it that just like
it's so gross. And then the ear.
The ear, the crunching of the pearl earring. Ugh.
Yeah, it's so nasty. But
and then the zombie sex later. Ew.
Yeah,
zombie sex, zombie baby. I love how the mom with that's one of my favorite zombie scenes. The whole lawnmower, a lot of people, the lawnmower scene. It's just so gory and fun. But I love how the mom at the end, because they have this kind of like a goofy version of Norman Bates kind of thing with the mother, is kind of like a final boss at the end where she's like completely transforms into this inhuman thing.
She's huge.
And then she like eats him with her belly, like bringing him back into the womb. There's nothing like a mother's love.
Yeah, if you want to watch a gory zombie movie, like that's way better than The Sadness.
It is. It's gory, but it's also so goofy and fun and ridiculous. It's just a really fun movie. It's like really
so fun.
So fun. Although there's a lot of good zombie comedies and fun zombie movies out there, aren't there?
There are. Shaun of the Dead is one of my favorite films of all time.
Me too.
It's in my top 13. I love it so much. I love the entire Cornetto trilogy, but that one, of course, is my favorite. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost are just two of the funniest actors together. Like, their humor just gets me. I don't know. It's my kind of humor. It's dry British humor, I know, but I love it.
Edgar Wright is such a musical type of director. Like, he thinks of a song as he writes a scene. That's how he works it, literally. And it is very beat for beat. And it's such a brilliant comedy in the idea of commenting on how we kind of live a very day-to-day horde zombie-fied
that's like the best scene. When he comes out of his house and like he's walking by people and they're doing normal shit and they're like zombies already, but they're not zombies, but then some are zombies. I love that whole scene. It's so clever.
It is. That whole movie is clever in general. Like they really killed it with that one.
There's a lot of callback humor with a lot of payoff. I love that. Of course, we all love the "Don't Stop Me Now" Queen song fight scene at the end.
And all the hits are on beat with the song.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And it doesn't lack gore. Like there is a really great
No.
gory scene where dude gets his guts ripped out.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Similar to Day of
fantastic.
the Dead. Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Day of the Dead. That's like Tom Savini, who was originally going to do Night of the Living Dead, but he had to go to Vietnam, and then he did Dawn of the Dead, which he thought was like his very good first beginning. But he really wished that he had consulted with the master of fake blood, Dick Smith.
Oh.
He did a lot. He invented a lot for special effects makeup because Dawn of the Dead has that very red blood still. So
Yeah.
Tom Savini considers Day of the Dead more of his masterpiece because he got more of that realistic anatomy with that realistic dark blood, different
Yeah.
levels of blood for how fresh it was.
He
Yeah.
pulled it off well.
I love that Day of the Dead scene where you're there with Frankenstein, and she's
Yeah.
kind
Dr.
of
Frankenstein.
he's like running down everything, and you see the different stages of his experiments and like his
He's
tests
so
and stuff.
adorable. And that reminded me
Yeah.
of a newer movie that I hadn't seen until you recommended it, Justine. 'Cause in Day of the Dead, there's that head with the wires in it. And then I saw that again in Overlord.
Oh yeah. Okay. Let's talk about Overlord. I love this movie so much. And Crystal, gosh darn it, I wish you
I
would have watched
know.
it.
I ran out of time to watch this movie, but
Oh,
It's all
I've
right. It was
so
it's like The
I
Descent where or other movies where it's like another movie first and then becomes horror.
yeah. So this I love like historical horror, like just generally I like historical films about war, like war films. And this one feels it's a war film at the very output. Like the very opening scene is really intense. They're flying into combat. They have a special mission that they're going to airdrop into, and you're following this like ragtag team of soldiers. And when they drop in, they're immediately shot out of the sky while trying to drop in. So they all get separated. Quite a few of them get killed right away. And you're following this kind of this one group with a very like unhappy leader. He's just not happy to be there. And they're meant to go like knock down a radio tower. Well, it's not just a radio tower. It is an like experimental underground laboratory where the Third Reich is trying to figure out ways to create the 1,000-year soldier. They're experimenting on villagers and people and stuff, and you meet like this one girl, and anyways they discover like that they've kind of become successful. They've created a way to reanimate people. The problem is if you're dead already, you come back like a monster and you just keep transforming
I
and
love
turning
the
into things.
stacks
And
hanging from the ceiling
oh yeah, they
in
have
the
these like
lab.
people in these like suctioned up sacks that are like very fleshy looking and like hanging from the ceiling from hooks. And like they have all these different people in different stages of experimentation. And it's really freaky because it's got that really like dank, gross underground science lab going on with it.
The Nazi doctor,
It's very
Nazi
like
doctor, the
steampunk.
Nazi doctor. It's a doctor,
Yeah. And
Nazi
then you
doctor.
have what's his face? The main guy that's like he's like the main Nazi bad guy of that area, but he was also in Game of Thrones. He played Euron Greyjoy, Johann Philip.
Of course, his name is
So
Shaun. Oh my god.
yeah. So
Johann.
he's like the big bad Nazi, and at one point he gets pretty messed up. Like his face gets like blown off a bit. And instead of like, he doesn't die, but he does end up getting the serum and injecting himself, and he becomes like this super soldier. And
That's
like,
a zombie that talks a lot.
yeah, well, he's not a zombie. The other things are zombies.
Okay.
The other experiments are zombies because they die and they like give them the serum and they come back and like they're not normal. They're like they saved one guy, remember, one of their own soldiers. They inject him and like they're like, oh, it didn't work, and they start to leave, and then he just like shoots up and he was like thirsty.
That's another
and
interesting
hot.
thing when it comes to zombie movies in general. And when 28 Days Later is one of the ones with a difference is how fast someone turns. Because in 28 Days Later, it's like 20 seconds. And in a lot of the Romero movies, it's it's a few hours, depending on the person. Which, again, you know, like slow, like it makes me also think of slow zombies or fast zombies. But I mean, slow zombies is like dying of of cancer, a very serious, debilitating illness slowly, as opposed to getting shot. You know, where you don't see it coming, but it's still painful.
Yeah. And in Overlord, they just they're just different stages of experiments. So I wouldn't say it's predominantly, like you said, it's kind of a couple movies within. It's not predominantly a zombie movie. It's more of like zombies are a matter of happenstance, I guess. Like in Overlord, the zombies are more of a byproduct of other experiments and like a different goal. And I think that's something that's really cool about zombie movies is how the zombies become like a thing. And like what is their origin? And with Overlord, it's a byproduct of another experiment that they're trying to accomplish something else. And I think that's a really popular theme with some zombie films is like they're trying to find ways to like live forever and they accidentally create zombies, or they're messing with like certain genomes or something and they're trying to find ways to like adapt the body and like they accidentally create zombies, which is exactly what happens in Pandorum. They accidentally create zombies in a way, and you can compare these ones, I think.
So that's where we get into that conversation again of like what personally do we consider, because I personally don't see it as a zombie movie at all. Like it feels like a creature mutant movie.
Right.
But yeah, Pandorum I consider more of a creature mutant movie where they were like encapsulated in space to adapt to the new planet, but they woke up early, so they adapted to the darkness of the ship. I just doesn't feel pandemic-y to me. It doesn't feel zombie-y to me. Just to me. That's me. That's my choice, though.
Yeah.
Why do you
I
think
think it was a good movie, I thought, but
it was good.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I
It's a
enjoyed it.
spiritual remake to Event Horizon, literally, and has a lot of the same people involved.
I didn't know that.
Oh, it is. Oh, totally. 100%. Because they couldn't get it made, so they made a spiritual remake.
One of the things that's really cool to me about Pandorum is you don't know what's going on until the very end, like what has happened, and it all kind of becomes clear. But in the very beginning, you just know that there's these creatures, and they look very much like the creatures from The Descent, and they're just all over the ship, and they're eating people, and you wake up with these crew members who don't know what's going on. So you don't either. At one point, you learn that it's this stuff that they put in their sleeping like nutrients to help them to adapt to whatever planet they're going to terraform and help them survive, because Earth is dead. It's gone. It's long gone. They're like the last bit of humanity. They have the last bit of plant life, everything on this ship. Yeah, exactly. And they're one of like very few ships, and they didn't wake up early. They woke up when they were supposed to. It's just
no, they woke up
didn't
late.
Land.
It was like 100 years or something like after they were supposed to in the ocean at the end.
Yeah.
Like what? What?
So
How? I still liked it. Don't get me wrong, but I'm like, wait a minute, what?
I get you don't like it.
No, I do like it. I do. I just like just because the movie I love a lot of movies with flaws, and I enjoyed a lot of this movie, and I love how they cast Dennis Quaid as okay, big spoiler, everybody, as the guy that was a bad guy, and he didn't even know he was a bad guy at first. He didn't remember that he's like, oh yeah, that
he
guy
had that disease that you get from being in hypersleep for too long, where he had lost his mind because they find out that the Earth was destroyed and he lost his mind. But what I liked about it was how they were supposed to adapt to a new planet, and that was what was put in their bloodstream. But because they crashed at the bottom of the ocean and they were having major power issues and they didn't have any food issues, these humans that would wake up from hypersleep over years were adapting to this cold, damp, dark spacecraft, and they had no food to survive on, so they became cannibalistic monsters who only thought about eating and breeding, and that was it. They had no humanity left. They were completely primal at that point, which is why I consider it a zombie movie, because if that wasn't in their bloodstream, they would not have become like that. They would have not turned into, I mean, one of the humans that survived that was still a human did become cannibalistic, but he woke up later. So we might be witnessing like him going through what they went through naturally years prior. And so it's just, to me, it's a really interesting take on the idea of zombies, but applied into a sci-fi space movie instead of like a on Earth scenario. That to me was just an interesting way to origin
923 years.
Yeah, so that's a long time.
Longer than 100.
Yeah,
a little bit.
I was way off.
Yeah,
923.
Yeah, and then you discover they're trapped at the bottom of the ocean on the planet.
For 923.
Yeah,
and they just didn't know it because the crew that was supposed to make everything work out and trigger the correct cycles was murdered by somebody else who put himself into hypersleep.
No, they weren't
So-
supposed to be in the ocean. That's
No, and again, that's because there's a certain like order of events that was supposed to happen. The crew was supposed to go to sleep. They were supposed to, two people
There's
were
supposed to
supposed
be a
to like, wake up the
generation
next
of
crew.
crews. It's
It was
be
supposed to,
a certain
yeah.
amount of time.
They were supposed to cycle, and because he killed them all and then put himself into hypersleep, there was no proper cycle. So the plane just autopiloted into the ocean. Like, there was no one to control its descent and do a controlled landing, nothing. So they just luckily ended up in the ocean, to be honest.
Yeah.
Could have been a lot worse. Everyone could have.
Could have been worse. They could have just been a ball of fire.
Yep.
Not that a lot of people would have noticed. They were either already dead or in but still,
Yeah.
but
Oh
still.
gosh, one of the most like gruesome things about that movie is where all of the colonists are in like the main hypersleep areas, and like they would wake up, like it would go through power cycles and it would kick some of them awake and like open up their chambers, and these creatures like fed on them like immediately. Can you imagine waking up and being eaten alive?
No.
No clue what the fuck is going on. Like, it's so
I
terrifying.
thought it was kind of interesting in the beginning because he's been in hypersleep for so long that he had like the extra skin on, so he had to take his extra skin.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, which is like the cover that you shared, Crystal, in Discord. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe that. I was like, I've never seen this cover. This is cool.
Yeah,
It
it
looks
was
similar
Speaking
to the
of
cover for
Discord.
Donkey Punch, actually, and that's not a joke. It,
Bringing up Donkey
I still
Punch
haven't
again.
seen that movie.
Speaking of Discord, you guys should join our Discord. It's a great community where we talk about the things that we're going to talk about on here, amongst other things, just life and horror movies. So if you enjoy that kind of community, join our Discord.
Be our
Friendly
friend.
horror community.
Be our friend.
Something interesting to me is that some of the lighter zombie movies have really interesting ideas. I wish that they would kind of slip into the more serious horror zombie flicks. In Zombieland, I liked how when you first become a zombie, you're fast. Because you still have a lot of energy. You're dead, but you're fast. And then
Yeah.
the more dead you've been, the more of a traditional Romero zombie you become. Very slow move. And I liked how in Warm Bodies, cute little Romeo and Juliet zombie movie, is that as a zombie, you have the opportunity, if you can find it in your brain, which usually happens by happenstance, and then you lean into it, become more yourself again or more human again. Or the other way, where there's like those darker zombies, they're not even really even human. They, like their body even looks different. They're more like creatures that are very
Yeah, the
fast.
bonies.
The bonies. Yeah.
Bonies. Yeah, I liked that. Like, I would like those aspects of zombieism to go into more serious zombie.
Warm Bodies is so sweet. I
It's
love that one.
It's a cute
Like
movie.
he like just finds a connection to her because he eats her boyfriend's brains and he's in love with her. So he
Yeah.
like kind of feels that love, and like it reminds him of his humanity, and he slowly gets warmer and like
Yeah.
becomes more human, and it sparks something in him, but then sparks something in his other zombie buddies. Like they grunt to each other. Like,
Yeah.
like, it's so cute. I love
But
it.
it touches upon that Romero idea of whether it's Land of the Dead, a zombie playing a trumpet, or Big Daddy from Land of the Dead who rallies the zombies together, or Bubs the zombie, or the zombies that go to the shopping mall. The idea that there's certain things or Shaun of the Dead touches upon it as well.
Mhm.
There's certain
He
things
plays
that we
video
do
games.
out of habit
Yeah.
that are more so instinctual than we realize, you know? And
Yeah, and in Warm
Yeah.
Bodies, if you lose that, like if you lose your humanity completely and just give up, as they say, you become the bonies and you start like
Yeah.
peeling away
They're
your own
scary.
skin and stuff. They are
Yeah.
scary.
They really
Yeah.
are.
And they're fast.
Yeah,
They
they're
are.
very fast. They're almost not zombies anymore. I would say.
No. They
Yeah.
gave me that like World War Z vibe.
World War Z, when it comes to World War Z or Train to Busan, a character that has two other characters that mirror both sides of himself, right? He's this businessman about who doesn't pay enough attention to his daughter. So there's another character who is a businessman, only cares about himself and endangers everybody else, and other people die just because he's protecting himself. And the other guy, who's a family guy who does everything to protect his friends. Like those two
Mhm.
characters like are mirror his duality of the
Mhm.
man he is and the man who he wants to become, And that's not even talking about the zombies in the movie. And there's a lot of great zombies in this movie and a lot of pylon zombies, but I feel where World War Z fails, which I hear the book is amazing. I can't say for sure. I have not read it. I hear the book is amazing. But with World War Z, I feel like we get our typical, we've seen it so many times. You know, Brad Pitt's our action hero, nuclear family guy that's going to save the world. And it's not
Probably
bad,
why I love it.
We've seen it though. We've seen it, but so I think that's why it doesn't. I'm not. I like it enough, but I think that's why it doesn't get as much praise because it's something we've seen to a point. Not that everything has to be something totally new.
I think they overdid it on the CGI in World War Z. They almost, it kind of gave that same like I Am Legend look to them. And when they overdo that and they make them too far removed from like a grounded, realistic feel, it gets really hard to believe. I think the idea of them piling on and climbing up was really cool, but they overdid the like mouth movements and stuff, and like
But The Walking Dead uses a lot of CGI, but I think they do it really well where it's like a CGI built on top of prosthetics.
right,
It's
much more realistic. It's believable. Like you don't become a zombie and suddenly get like a disjointed jaw that really stretches out and comes back. Like you don't, that doesn't you're not like a possessed demon. Like there's no like weird paranormal thing happening in this, which just doesn't make sense for a zombie movie. So I don't like that. I didn't like that about I Am
dead
Legend
are rising
either.
from the dead are rising from the graves, but it being too paranormal just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Well, if you're grounding your whole plot in science, you can't then make it like a stretched out, like out of this world looking thing. I think that's where they made a mistake. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. It was like a 0 to 1,000 movie. Like once things kick off, it does not let up. It is relentless. And I love that intensity.
I just keep thinking of the South Park episode with Cartman when he's like dressed as Brad Pitt with a little scarf. Okay, but I just think of the South Park episode that mirrors World War Z.
Pride and Prejudice in zombies is really ridiculous.
I
so
saw
if you're going to do ridiculous, really lean in like that one because that one is silly and like I love that. It's like a parody and it was so much fun. It's literally like Pride and Prejudice with zombies and it's fun.
But it has the zombies tacked on there for sure. I liked it. I liked it enough because I really like Pride and Prejudice. So I was surprised actually how much they held to the Pride and Prejudice original story and the original meaning behind it.
Oh, it's like really exactly the same, right?
Yeah, they did.
I've never actually seen Pride and Prejudice, so I know.
It's on Tubi.
I know.
I've never seen not even the BBC one. Well, I was raised by grandparents, so of course I've seen the BBC.
Yeah.
Just like
I did watch
dramas.
the zombie one. The zombie
one.
You
did watch the zombie one?
Then you practically watched it.
You did, really. It really has all the important elements in there.
Yeah, the only difference I think is that, again, they add zombies, so there's this like extra element of conflict that they're dealing with. But they also normalize like what is considered high society for you, for a respectable person, is to be trained in like Japan instead of Shanghai or something, and like the right martial arts to like combat zombies. Now that's not in Pride and Prejudice. Instead, they're like talking about like if they're musically inclined or like they make stuff like needlepoint, and which they touch on in Pride, Prejudice, and Zombies too.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I just can't see how you could be martially arts trained and be trained in the domestic arts as well. I feel like you have to really focus on one or you're not good at either.
That's why these women were incredible. Super women. The men, the women, a whole nother level. And Lena Headey, she's so cool.
Oh, she's always cool.
So cool.
I'm like, how is she playing? Like, that character's usually an old woman, not like a younger middle-aged woman.
That's true. That's true. She's so funny too. Like she's very deadpan and like humorless. What's his face is really good in it too. Matt Smith.
Which one was he? Mr. Darcy?
He played Carson Collins.
Oh yeah, he did.
Their cousin Colin.
The character.
He's such a dork. I loved it. He played it really well. I don't know. No, Sam Riley was Fitzwilliam Darcy. And Fitzwilliam, if my daughter was a boy, that's what I was going to name her, was Fitzwilliam. I wanted to lean into you, Crystal, because we talked about ridiculous, but I do want to talk about the most grounded of zombie movies, and that's a found footage one.
Let's talk about Wreck. I think I always touch on the found footage ones, don't I?
You do. You're our found footage queen.
Yeah.
And I'll
take
be
the
the
title.
commercial garbage one. I like
I
it.
will always. This is probably one of my favorite found footage movies. This is actually one of my favorite Spanish movies as well. Spanish horror movies. Fantastic movie. If you guys haven't seen that one, you have to go check it out. It is so scary, but this does touch on, again, like a supernatural pathogen virus.
Mhm.
Again, some people don't consider this a zombie movie. We've already talked about that.
We do.
But
Too
this,
bad. Move on. Just
yeah,
kidding.
exactly. Shut up about it. But yeah, no, this one has some terrifyingly haunting scenes. There's one scene in particular where they're on a stairwell and they like peek the camera over and they see all of the infected like running up the stairs behind them, and they go into an apartment building and there's a woman who's infected and she runs at them, and there's a whole end scene in night vision that is
Oh, that's
like
the worst.
keeps you so on the edge of your seat. It's like a freaking nail biter.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
this movie got under my skin the first time I ever watched it. And there's a American remake called Quarantine as well, who it's not an awful remake, but the original is so much better. This is so
I
much
agree.
better.
I don't think it's an awful remake either. And unfortunately, I saw Quarantine first, and that's typically how it seems to go for me. I always end up seeing the American remake and then hearing that it's a remake of another film and then seeing that foreign film, which has
Yeah.
gotten better, I think, nowadays than it used to be. Before we had as much access to horror as we do now, that's not the case. Like, it was much harder to hear about and get access to foreign horror, and now it's everywhere, and I love that.
I agree. Yeah. And then, yeah,
You know, in Rex,
it's
they
not a
didn't
bad
know
film.
that the characters didn't have a script. They didn't know what was going to happen to their characters.
Oh, really?
That
I
makes
did not
it
know
even
that.
that's probably why it's so scary. Like,
Yeah.
Like
so
that's why a lot of them are
intense.
so terrified when everything's, especially our main character.
I'd
They
be
did
terrified
not know what was
too.
going to happen.
That
Yeah,
poor girl.
everything in that movie is so damn scary. I would never
And
want
it
to be
feels
in
like
that
everyone's
situation.
adapting. Like, whoa, what's happening? What? So that's it. Really adds to it.
It's got a very
we've
claustrophobic feel too. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it does. No, you're right though. It does, because you're trapped in this building. They literally quarantine them, right?
Yeah.
It's terrifying, and there's nothing they can do about that. It's
And they're
again
not
that lack
telling
of
them.
control.
Yeah, and they're not telling them why they're in there. Like they keep trying to figure out why they're stuck in there, and they're just like, "Nope, too bad, you're locked in." Which is
Yeah.
also like a whole other scary aspect, not even just the infected part.
Totally.
Yeah.
Lack
And
of control.
we've touched on that a couple times now with different films. Like, I thought World War Z was really scary and intense because of how fast the zombies were. And I feel like that's exactly why 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later is really intense too. Do you guys prefer fast zombies or slow zombies?
Fast.
I prefer fast. They scare me more.
Well,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
they work better for a scary aspect. I'm
Yes.
more scared of the fast ones, but like I love and appreciate the slow zombies as well. So,
Me too. Well said,
Yeah.
because I was going to say I do respect the slow zombie because of what it's telling. Like the metaphor there, I think is really good and interesting.
Yeah, I respect the fast zombie, but I prefer the slow. I think my mind is the worst thing ever, and I'm not a very quick person. So if there's fast zombies, I'm gonna be dead. Okay, it's not gonna.
Right.
I'm not gonna think of it. It's not. I'm not.
I would prefer slow zombies if we're gonna have zombies in real life.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But when I watch a movie, I love a lot of the fast zombies. I love them. So I guess I really don't have a preference, but if I had to pick one, I tend to like the slow zombies or something.
That's fair.
Even though
And I mean,
all of my
I
favorites
get
are
that.
fast zombie movies. It's hard to say. I say slow, but then when I really think about it, I really love a lot of the fast. I really don't think
I
The
feel like that
slow
was
zombies are iconic. While we're on the topic of like fast versus slow zombies, we can touch a little bit more on Train to Busan. This is the only zombie movie that has ever made me like sob uncontrollably, and I'm sure a lot of
Same.
people feel that way. This is the saddest zombie movie.
It captured it so well.
That ending scene with his like shadow jumping off and like her little face, like it's heart-wrenching, absolutely heart-wrenching. But that's another movie that a lot of people consider to be like one of the best zombie movies, but they're infected just like all the other infected movies. So I always find
They
that
never tell us why they're. I mean, we get the idea that it's like it's some kind of leak from a biochemical plant.
Yeah,
But we
it's like
don't know
bioengineered.
exactly. We don't know if they've come back from the dead or not. We just know they're infected somehow.
Exactly, yeah. And they're so fast, and that movie, I want to say like almost every scene keeps you so on the edge of your seat. Like during that whole movie, I'm just like, oh my god, run! Oh my god! Oh my god! Like everything.
Yeah, it's
every
intense.
scene is.
I love that
it's
they
so
got real
intense.
contortionists for it too. For a lot of
Oh,
those
did they?
scenes. Where they're
Oh,
like,
I didn't
yeah.
know
Oh
that.
no, I know. They got real contortionists for like a
that's
lot of those
cool.
scenes. Not every infected is, but the ones where they really go into it, those are real
Yeah.
contortionists.
There's a lot of horror in Asia that has like the contorting bodies like somehow
Yeah.
in it. It's so freaky. I
It
love
is.
that. Like that, just the body moving unnaturally is really off-putting. And I do love those elements that felt so real. Like
Yeah.
it's a real in your feelings type of horror movie. Like,
It hits hard, yeah.
it does. And you really
Yeah.
feel for these characters. Like
You do.
the main father, like what a good dad. Like and the
I
whole
love
time.
him.
Like, I
He
love
became
him
a
too.
really great dad. He
He
became
was
really
such a good dad.
Yes, he's a good
And
actor.
like
the other guy that was like the ideal version of himself as a family man, you know, when he sacrificed himself, it's like, oh my god, that's the first really big feel, you know. And he names this, he shouts out to his significant other, by the way, our baby's name is, and gives him the baby's name.
Oh yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
god, that movie. It just hits so hard. My god.
Another cute one that's less, not to change the subject completely. One that's less of a downer, but still is a cute movie, which I didn't want to get into it because it has a huge twist at the end that completely ruins the movie if you know it, is One Cut of the Dead. Have you seen that one?
I haven't seen that one.
No, so it has.
Oh wait, yeah, I have. Yeah, that's the one where they're
Japanese-
filming a movie and they
Justine.
Don't give
Sorry,
away
is that the twist.
No, but if Chris hasn't seen it, it's like one of those movies that is like just like a.
I didn't even know that was the twist.
about
I
it
thought
too
that
much.
was just known.
It is. They are filming a movie, but let's not go into it too much. I don't know why I want to protect that movie so much, but like it's like you cannot. You have to.
It's really popular.
It is. You have to. But Crystal, if you haven't, you'll like One Cut of the Dead a lot. It's very. I think it's still on Shudder.
It's
still
very found footage-y.
One Cut of the Dead, which like I wanted to talk about that movie, but at the same time, you can't talk about it without revealing a lot, and it's not like a twist like you think usually. It's more of a narrative shift.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that. Yeah. Okay,
Well,
yeah.
I'm gonna have to
I
watch
won't
it.
say any more.
Watch me be like, "Shut up, Justine," and then I ruin it completely. Like, oh, by the way,
I'd be so sad.
I want to ruin the movie.
Well, there's like another one that has a pretty lighthearted tone to it that's also really popular that Crystal you can talk about, which is
Yeah, I just want to do a quick shout out to Pontypool. Yeah. I think Pontypool, well, because I'm going to give it a shout out because I'm Canadian. This is a Canadian movie. I'm Canadian. It's Canadian. So, but this is a really cool single location movie set in a radio station. It's a very, very unique take on zombies. One that has never been done ever. I don't think ever before. It never really shows anything in this movie, which I really, really like. It leaves a lot up to your imagination as to what's going on outside the radio station walls. And like I said, it's just a very unique take on a zombie movie. So I'm not going to give anything away in case you haven't seen it. Just watch it. It is a kind of popular movie. It's a popular underrated movie amongst horror fans, I find sometimes.
It is. It's
Some people
amazing,
don't know what about it.
Without giving much to it's amazing what they do, the concept they have. I just don't want to give too much away. It is amazing
I know that's
how
the
it
thing,
keeps you so interested. It like
It
without
does, yeah.
going a certain direction. So it's definitely a recommend. I mean, before I saw it, it was one that was recommended to me a lot.
Yeah, I had heard it recommended a bunch too.
Me too. I actually watched it because it was recommended so much to me when I started TikTok. Stephen McHattie is really great. He's that's where it kind of gets its lighthearted tone sometimes, is because he's kind of a comical guy. Like,
yeah, there's definitely
a little
some
over the top, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd be not the people that know me. When I say if he was a little younger, he'd be totally my type, and I was like, younger, fuck you. But you know what I mean.
Don't you like him a little seasoned? Like
I like them. I'm a grave digger, not a gold digger. You know. Anyway, zombies. By the way, what were we talking about?
You'll get no ageism from Emma. So I think we covered quite a few zombie movies. Now there's going to be some noticeable favorites that we didn't really dive into too deep. And that's partly because it's out there. A lot of people dive into them. They're popular. They're huge. We covered mostly the ones that we wanted to and the ones that we love, I think. And I think we got through a lot of them. So bear with us on that. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit that like button. Leave a comment. Do you prefer fast zombies or slow zombies? Do you consider 28 Days Later a zombie film? What are your boxes that you check that make it a zombie movie? Let us know in the comment. Join our Discord. Click all the link, all of them.
We're coming to get you, Barbara.
We're coming to get you, Barbara.
Barbara!
Barbara, they're
Next
coming
time.
for you.
Next time.
I'm not
Until
gonna
next
do one this time.
time.
Goodbye. Just kidding. We're gonna play that.
Bye bye. Where all the zombies come.
All right, I'm gonna stop.